Welcome, everyone. It's a real privilege to welcome you to this session, to all from 59 countries around the world. As we have lived, my name is Monica Altamirano. I'm Program Manager Finance for Adaptive Planning at Deltaras. And I welcome you to our session, Financing a Paradigm Shift in Our Development Models. We have all experienced our vulnerability in the last months, and we are becoming also aware that climate impacts will challenge our status quo even more than COVID-19. We gathered today here to discuss how can we drive three revolutions that are urgent for that paradigm shift. One in understanding, one in planning, and one in finance. And with partnerships to trigger those require systemic change and finance this transition. I feel extremely privileged to welcome today pioneering persons around the world driving this paradigm shift. And as the woman from the second poorest country in Latin America that I can tick all boxes for being a minority, I would like to say, though, that what I want to invite you today is not to a ticking box exercise, is to really engage with your hearts, not only with your minds, on a discussion and how can we drive this paradigm shift together. And so I would like to say I'm the guilty one, and apparently maybe in one way not too visible, but in another way felt very privileged to be able to choose all the people that will talk to you today. And they're all men, and at the same time, I'm sure they, together with a lot of powerful women that are driving this shift, can do that change and are committed to kind of move literally those leverage points to get us soon to a new economic development model where it's not economy versus environment, but it's the three of them. And that's the call for today, to engage in a constructive discussion. You know, sometimes coming from that place, from a place where you're struggling with basic needs, maybe it also reminds you that it's not about the form. You know, as the Little Prince said, the essential is sometimes hidden to the eyes. So I like with this to pass also and to welcome here to the studio Tom Cummings. Tom Cummings is from the founding circle of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, which strive to finance the change and change finance. But also, and I'm so delighted that he can be here because he is also a member of the Club of Rome, and he's working in this project called Emergence from Emergency. So how do we emerge from this apparently, I mean, this crisis that we never saw coming towards a place where we're really financing transforming projects. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Monica, thank you, and welcome everyone. I want to say a big welcome to the Stockholm International Water Institute for World Water Week, Deltaras, the government of the Netherlands, ADB, IDB, and I'm coming from the Global Alliance, and there are probably some others listening as well. As Monica said, it's so crucial that in this decade of transformation that we bear down on the questions that we need to face as we think through the shift that needs to be made in the way that we think about partnerships and the way that we think about our commons, the water. I want to invite all of you who are out there to engage in a little experiment with us. There's going to be a link that's going to be put in the chat, and it's to a wall that's called Mural. And Mural is it's a massive whiteboard, and it's a way that you can contribute to this conversation Well, if you open another screen on your computer where you're watching us, and then if you want to say something, you simply go onto Miro and you push the plus sign, and then you can double click and you have a post-it note, and you can write whatever you like on the post-it note. This is a little bit our way to have graffiti in the meeting and to have people comment. And if you want to make contact with one of our presenters, this is the option that you can use for doing that, as well as if you want to contribute in chat and with your own questions. So I think we should go ahead and begin. We have several presenters and several panelists. Today we have Henk Ovink, we have Thomas Panella, we have Raul Munoz. I think many of you know our panelists, our presenters. We also have on our panel Amit Singh, Luis Mariano, Niels Vlaanderen, and Christian Severin. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up today with our special envoy for international water affairs in the Netherlands, and I'll pass over to Monica to introduce him. So that means the camera goes that way. Good.
Okay. Yeah, I would really, as we just have 45 minutes, I can't make justice to Henk and introduce him properly, but he's our special envoy for international water affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I'm very honored to have you part of this. And can you please, Henk, share with us perspective on how the Netherlands is driving this paradigm shift?
And Henk will not be visible today. He'll be by voice only.
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Henk.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much both for inviting me. I'm so sorry. Technology is leaving me behind. And thanks, Monica, for your words on gender in this panel. We had a discussion on this. I think it's critically important to ensure that inclusion and collaboration are not words, but are actually practice. But thanks for addressing this, critically important. Since time, I will move fast. One, the economic impacts of climate change and other disasters, being the gender, water, conflicts, and of course health, as we see in this current pandemic, are massive. Capturing these risks and opportunities is where we fail as a world. While we say, in Europe we're living through the worst economic depression, but this is happening all across the world. Low-income nations are impacted by this pandemic. All our resources go there, and the first challenge is that with our relief actions, with our recovery actions, we put a lot of money in our economies, in our societies, but that money goes to response, band-aid approaches, and not to sustainability, resiliency, and climate action. So there's a reduction in budget that is massive, but it also moves to the wrong part. The good thing is, of course, that the world showed that we can. There is an opportunity. Water, in the context of this pandemic, has shown it is a first line of defense and the best first step of recovery. Then again, we lag behind in the wash sector, water sanitation and hygiene, with over 2 billion people lacking access to safe drinking water, over 3 lacking access to hygiene facilities, and over 4 access to sanitation. The pandemic could be the stepping stone, the leverage for wash action, but it's not happening. So we fall short as an international community in the context of the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and the way how to evaluate, validate sustainable climate action. Now, the Netherlands wants to be a partner here, rethinking these economic models to help ensure that there are business cases, not for stupid infrastructure, but for comprehensive, inclusive, and sustainable investments, that we can look at the future and the way we prepare our proposals instead of respond to the past, and that we not replicate past mistakes and build not the pipeline that we have now, but replace that pipeline with a pipeline of sustainable opportunities. We have an international water agenda, supports all our partners actually on the panel in the practices they put in place, the GEF, the GCF, the ADB, the World Bank, partner with as many as we can to provoke the world to come up with better solutions. And one of the ways to provoke that is to try to do it. We do it in policy and in our conversation and in politics, but also in innovation. One of the initiatives is an initiative Monica is also involved in Asia. It's called Water as Leverage, really using water in its way, how it can connect across the SDGs in social, cultural, environmental, and economic ways. How water can be the enabler for sustainable development. Investing in water trickles down across the SDGs. You see the returns. Nature can do the trick, we say, but then it needs time and space. Water can do the trick if we increase the scope of our investments and the way we evaluate them, and give it time and space to come to bear. So I would say there is only an opportunity, but that opportunity comes by collaboration, and collaboration not as a one-off, but consistently across the next decade. And this is where I would definitely say the donor community fails. We do a lot of pilots, we do a lot of one-offs, we're happy with the results, and then we move to the normal back again. How can we ensure that every innovation we put in place is actually changing on a systems level, our institutions, our informal and formal collaborations, and the individual capacity we have? And that demands that next to investing in these projects, we have to invest in an enabling environment that has that capacity to ensure that we continue on our efforts. So consistency, continuity, and commitment in the way we explore opportunities, scale them up, and replicate them across. So those would be my points. Last would, of course, engage with us. We have a Global Commission on Adaptation and a Water Action Track. We have a Climate Summit, January 25th, where we bring the world together on water. We have a Valuing Water initiative coming from the High-Level Panel on Water, where we bring the world together on valuing water. We are one of the initiating partners of the Roundtable on Financing Water, and so forth. So many initiatives where we can bring financial, policy, practice, communities, formal and informal, together to ensure that we do the right thing, capture those mechanisms, replicate, and bring them to scale for the impact we need. I want to close. I want to thank the organizers and the panelists for doing this with us during World Water Week at home, and look forward to the debate. Thanks very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Henk. And I think it's fantastic that what I hear you saying is that the need is to create the conditions for systemic change, and you are really working on several different levels in that space. We would like to now go to Tom Panella. He's the Chief Water Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank, Chief of Water Sector Group. Tom, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We see your presentation. Take it away.
Okay, I can't see my presentation, but I am happy to take it away. So thanks, Monica and Tom, for the introduction, and Hank for your opening remarks. Always hard to follow, but I just want to check with my colleagues. Can you see the next slide at this point? I can't see anything here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we see your first slide.
We see your first slide.
And I've shared, and
yes.
You have control of your slides, so I think if you just click forward and see if that works.
It doesn't seem to be working here.
As I said,
you see the first slide or you see the second slide? I'm really sorry for this. This is embarrassing.
No problem. Otherwise, we can also project it that you can see it. So
yeah, that would be useful, and then we can just say next slide because yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, we'll ask Begonia to give us just up on the screen the presentation of Tom Panella.
And apologize. So let me talk about it. The first project, I want to go through 3 projects quickly, and I think I want to respond to a couple of Hank's points about where progress is being made. So the first project is the climate resilient and okay, so is it showing here? I'm sorry, we went through this in rehearsal, but
1 second, it's coming now. just
yeah. So let me talk about this. So first project I think is the most important. It's the climate resilient and water resource sensitive project. This was approved 2 days ago. It's with Shenzhen Water Company in China. This is through our private sector lending arm. And again, this is to finance sponge cities and climate resilient water adaptation activities, as well as water supply and sanitation. And I think the important thing about this is, one, we've been financing sponge cities, which I think is a well known concept for resilience, and this has been done through our sovereign arm. So this project is through a client that we've been funding through sovereign finance, but now has taken a $200 million private sector loan. And this private sector loan also has the opportunity to leverage an additional, next slide, please. Can somebody advance the slide? I can see it here.
Is climate resilient techniques is up?
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. We go to climate resilient techniques. Next slide, please. So the idea is that this, the Shenzhen Water Company, this is fine here, thank you, and apologies for the technical difficulties, will be supporting not only Shenzhen Water, but subsidiary sub-project agreements across municipalities. And next slide, please. I think the next, the most important thing is that if you look at the way the financing, it comes from ADB through private sector to Shenzhen Water Environmental Investment Company that goes to sub-projects. Okay, this is all through private sector, and the $200 million ADB is for direct loan or co-financing with commercial banks or co-financing through guarantees to Shenzhen Water that then filters down to the sub-projects through agreements with municipal governments. It all flows back through the sub-projects back to ADB. So, you know, the point of this conversation is about financing. The important thing is, I think, through ADB engagement, social and environmental safeguards have all been upgraded. Gender mainstreaming has been incorporated into the funding modality for hiring and training. Again, its focuses on sponge cities and climate change adaptation through wastewater technologies or wastewater and water supply technologies. Focuses on climate resilience, and this filters down from Shenzhen Water to 3rd and 4th tier city municipalities who will be taking the loans, but also have the requirements to take this advanced technology and approaches forward. And again, this is all through private finance. Next slide, please. So the second project I'd like to talk about is we have a new contingent disaster financing instrument that was approved in August 2019. It's contingent disaster financing relief. So basically, countries agree to this, and it provides pre-approved financing for natural disasters. And than immediate liquidity after the disaster. In April 2020, we expanded it to include health emergencies, so COVID basically. As of August, 8 Pacific countries have availed of this, 6 for COVID response, 2 for typhoons. But I think the most important thing about this is it not only provides response, it requires upfront ex-ante policy and other changes to show that the country is on a path towards resilience and provides support to help them get there. And it takes a long-term programmatic approach for resilience, for natural disaster, and now for health-related emergencies. So while providing support for response, it also encourages upfront improved resilience, lowering those response costs. And we have $1 billion of these under preparation with the Pacific and Southeast Asia ongoing for health and natural disaster. And go ahead.
About 1 minute left, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, okay. So next slide, please. And lastly, how we're responding to the COVID crisis directly. We have a flood risk management and pandemic response project that has just been put together for Chennai, India, which is extremely vulnerable to climate change and regular urban flooding, especially in high density, low income communities. So while we're doing the typical things with flood risk management of both structural and non-structural improvements, it has a specific component on health that will provide flood resilient wash facilities, PPE, training for sanitary waste disposal in schools, health centers, improved COVID and infectious disease surveillance as a part of flood. So it's a fully integrated health, flood, infectious disease response. And this will be approved next year for about $250 million. And it has a fully integrated approach to flood and pandemic and epidemic. And again, part of this work has been done through our relationship and leadership in the HELP, the high level experts and leaders panel on water related disaster. So I'll leave it at there. But Hank, the challenges you throw out, people are responding and we need to do more, but it's in progress. Thank you.
Wonderful, Tom, to see the ways you're responding. I'd like to go now to Raul Munoz. He's the Senior Water Specialist at IADB. Raul, you're there. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me and see me well?
We can see you. We can see your desktop.
Okay, I'm gonna share my slides. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you first, and good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are. Thank you for the conveners of this session to have the IDB today in this session, especially to Deltares. So I'm going to talk about a little bit our new initiative for water security in Latin America and the Caribbean. Actually, we are open to the public in the next weeks, in the following weeks, the publication, which basically tell you about the new program in terms of lending and technical assistance and research in water-related management from the IADB around this new concept. Is called Water for the Future, or Agua para el Futuro in Spanish. So when we were preparing this piece of work last year, this new from a newspaper in Spain came to me, and I was thinking at that time how relevant was this thing of water security. If the humankind is looking for water in other planets, I think we are on a very bad situation when that comes to water, right? So you downscale, we are actually looking for fresh water underneath the sea. So same theme. And the question for the IDB is, how relevant is this concept of water security for Latin America? So this is a new headline from a magazine, the Americas Worldly, The Invisible Crisis. I'm talking about this crisis which is affecting Latin America with more droughts, with more severe droughts and floods, especially driven by climate change and bad planning and more in different places over the region. So this is a serious topic, and we wanted to work in further, and we wanted to embrace this new, more innovative concept in the way of the management of water. So it's a water security concept. You have many definitions. Basically, for us, we basically think that we need to transition from the water-centric way of managing water resources to a more holistic way. And for us, the concept is more related with environmental security, actually. See, for our strategy, the environment and the ecosystem services and the re-infrastructure network-based solutions are central. So, so we made first an assessment just to give some figures for those who are not from the region. We have around 326 million people with access to sanitation, 180 million people with access to safe water, 88% of the household without access to water treatment, wastewater treatment, sorry. And by 2025, we expect to have 11 countries in the region with deficits in water storage infrastructure. So, and the funny thing, or the crazy thing, is that Latin America accounts for 30% of the global freshwater supplies. Actually, we have 4 times more water than per capita than other regions in the world, but still we have many countries in red here in this slide that are today in a very bad situation in terms of water access. Sorry about that. The situation is going to look worse in the next decade. So we made this assessment a couple of years ago, and we model and we map in 100 by 100 kilometers square grid the water stress situation under different socioeconomic and climate scenarios in the next decades. And actually, many places that in the region are considered today water safe is going to be under very severe conditions if the situation keeps business as usual. So what are the problems? Usual suspects. So we have a lot of water in Latin America, but we have inefficient management. Water quality attached to environmental degradation is a big issue, but of weak laws and institutional governance and management frameworks. We need more infrastructure for water management and for more efficient from different sectors use of water. Climate change, like I said, obviously if you think in Latin America, you think in the Amazon basin, for example, we need better transboundary frameworks and coordination of the management of water between countries if we want to have sustainable and resilient use of water. So I say like we have this usual success in terms of problems, but our value proposition is have more innovation in the approach. So when we design both funding or finance or loans and technical assistance. So the pillars for us are going to be investing more in the better understanding of the ecosystem, the role of the water preservation and green infrastructure, better understanding of climate change impacts, both in the physical side, but also on the demand side, which is very important. And we want to mainstream further the Nexus concept. So we need more integration. Advance in science and technology, especially when that goes to data access. We need to have better data to have better decisions and decision support tools, and better institutional and finance frameworks and instruments, including, like I said, transboundary frameworks for management. So basically, to close, what is needed for a paradigm change to water security lack? We need to close the gap in terms of access to water supply, and especially to sanitation. We need to invest in efficient infrastructure designed from a Nexus perspective. We need to modernize the framework for management of water, the legal frameworks and the governance frameworks and the institutionality. We need to push further for a pollution prevention agenda. We need to generate better and long-term vision knowledge on nature-based solutions and ecosystem functionality for water management. We need to develop flexible and innovative financial models. Obviously, as some of you just said, we need to include the private sector in the equation, and we need to push further for blended finance. And we need adequate frameworks for transboundary basis management. So, and last but not least, support knowledge development for science and technology. So Thank you all for your attention, and again for the invitation to the IADB to present our agenda in water security. I keep open for any questions you may have.
Excellent, Raul. Thank you very much. So we've now heard from Henk saying to us we need to partner and provoke. We've had a chance to listen profoundly to Tom, who is saying we have projects on the ground, and now Raul saying to us we've got to find different ways in which we can look at this set of systemic issues, especially in places in the world where it appears we have more water, but the way that we're able to engage the partners for that make a big difference. I'd like to now go to the moderated panel, and I'd like to ask all the panelists to open your videos so we can see you all, and then we'll enlarge the video here because I have next to me Niels Vlaanderen. Yes, okay, so there we go, there's Niels. So this is great. So everybody can see everyone here. If your screen is the same as mine, I've got Niels Vlaanderen next to me. He's the coordinator for International Water, Ministry of Infrastructure and Water here in the Netherlands. There's Christian Severen, who's there. Chris Severen, he's the lead international waters at the Global Environmental Fund. We have Amit Singh, and Amit is the Director of Policy, Research and Planning at the Ministry of Waterways and Environment in Fiji. Welcome. And we have Luis Marino, and he is the Director, Environmental Economics and Finance at the Ministry of Environment in Peru. So thanks to all of you from around the world. I'd like to start with Luis, just to give us a couple of minutes of perspective from Peru. The floor is yours. Do we have your sound?
Hello. Hello.
There you are. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
A little bit louder, I think we need. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning and good evening with all the people. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share with your Peru's vision regarding of the challenge of financing for water security. My English is not so good, and I expect you can forgive my mistakes. Okay. As many countries, Peru is facing a series of competing demands for the use of water resources. There is a need to provide safe and reliable drinking water for population, where quality and sustainability of services also conditioned by the conservation of the natural infrastructure for climate change adaptation. 11 years after the creation of the Ministry of Environment, there have been positive change in environmental institutionally and regulation development, enabling the implementation of schemes and incentives to conserve ecosystem services and raise public awareness about climate change and other environmental challenges. Significant progress has been made in the regulatory and programmatic framework for the implementation of natural infrastructure through public investment, including this concept in the regulations of the national investment systems, the Invierte.pe, allowing public investment to close the gap for this type of infrastructure. However, beyond the instruments that can be generated to mobilize financing, there are additional aspects limiting the takeoff of this type of investment, among which are need for multi-sectoral perspective in water resource management and need integration in sectoral policies, need for capacities strengthened in project development, information asymmetries among levels of government and water policy stakeholders, and the lack of capacity to ensure capital investments or sustain programs and projects from the point of view of operating costs. In this context of economic recovery from the pandemic, there is a window of opportunity to catalyze decision-making in both political and financial management to stand out and incorporate components and solutions for climate change, mitigation and adaptation, influencing change in production and consumption patterns, allowing greater resilience and ability to recover and maintain environmental conditions. A clear example in this execution of the integral plan for reconstruction with change in the regions affected by the Niño phenomenon in 2017, demanding investments from more than $2 billion in the next 2 years, whose components include considerations linked to the risk management. Investments in sustainable infrastructure must consider natural infrastructure from diagnosis and design. An opportunity in the execution of the National Infrastructure Plan for Competitiveness, which will include environmental sustainability criteria for project prioritization, being essential to incorporate natural infrastructure in sectoral investment proposals such as sanitation, housing, irrigation, hydropower, transportation.
Luis, I need to pass it on to Amit. Do you have just a couple of summary words that give us really succinctly what you think is most important from the perspective of Peru and the work you're doing?
Okay. So we can said the last words, trying to about some reflection. Finally, while there is still a way to go, financial markets have learned to read or are learning more quickly about of climate risk and their impacts on the business, on banking and capital markets. But the risks associated with biodiversity losses are still new. And I think now the pandemic has allowed us to put all the risks in the true dimension and provides us with an opportunity. I think this is the maybe the most important reflection that we have to do in this context.
Wonderful.
The opportunity of putting the same oh, you have to forgive my English. Putting the same in the same with the same value. This kind of risk, not only climate risks. We have to include in our mindset the loss of biodiversity as the same way.
So very much an integrated approach. I hear you saying we have to learn more quickly is what I'm really also hearing you say, is that we've got to really bring the banks and the financial markets to the place of need more quickly. Amit, can you stream in for us and give us your perspective? I know that one of the things that you're concerned with is that we really need to focus and be ready for the readjustment. You're on mute, Amit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Perfect. Go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. I agree with Hank when he said, we are done doing pilot projects and it's now time to move on to big and better projects. I mean, pilot projects and projects that were one-off, time for this is gone now. It's time now to scale up to something better, scale up our systems, things that have served us well in past, scale it up so that it is more climate resilient in design and can help us better adapt in future. So I'll just start giving my perspective to this. Fiji, as you know, is an island country with approximately 330 islands covering an area of about 1.3 billion square kilometers in the South Pacific Ocean. So by the looks of it, you can imagine our development challenges, especially when climate change is taking its toll on us, and also when year in and year out we have category 3, category 4, category 5 tropical cyclones that hits us. We have to readjust, then get back to building infrastructures, mobilizing fund, building our economy back. So what we have done, we have set a clear vision and aspirations through our national development plans, national adaptation plans moving forward. We aspire to move to green and sustainable ways of coastal and flood management. These are two things that are of essence to us. The grey to green transition has begun, especially at my ministry, whereby we are using green and nature-based solution for coastal defense system for vulnerable communities. But this itself is a challenging task. When I say it's a challenging task, because when we have to mobilize funds to address the plights of more than 90% of Fijian who live within 10 kilometers of the coast, it's in itself a lot of work, you know. And moving from Fiji now to the regional perspective, I would say the geopolitics of the region and the politics of development aid in the region is very different from the other parts of the world. Pacific as a region is a busy donor space. It has become an arena for geostrategic competition amongst much larger players, whereby, you know, there are discussions that say that some of them are using their ODA, let's say, money to exert influence on Pacific island countries. More so, there is also a sectorial demarcation of major donors. It's quite significant in the region. If you look at Australia and New Zealand in recent years, they have been prioritizing their aid in governance space. So they want frameworks, they want policy and institutional aspect of things. European Union is more into humanitarian aid. World Bank and ADB are the two institutions who are financing infrastructures. Given this, we also know that ADB and World Bank over the years, they only spend 5 and 4% of their total ODA in the region. So what this means is there is a infrastructure gap in the region, and that gap is filled up by Chinese financing, you know. And so moving on from here, how it affects us as a nation who are trying to build resilience, and how it affects our aspiration. So let me share a few insights about it. In August 2019, we had a flood management assessment undertaken by the Dutch DIR team. And after the assessment, the team recommended feasibility study of proposed interventions costing around 300,000 euros. It's been a year since the team has done the assessment. We are still looking for funding from the MDBs, from different funding agencies, even local development banks, to fund a 300,000 feasibility study work for a watershed which is very relevant and to Fiji's economy, and try to mobilize funds to do a feasibility study and then see if the interventions proposed are feasible or not, and promote that feasibility study into a proper project. While we know that most of the MDBs, they operate on country partnership strategy, I think there is an urgent need for facilities like the Dutch-funded water financing facility at ADB to mobilize efforts in water-related projects. The second thing I want to share about is the implementation of MDB-funded projects in the region. If you look at MDB-funded projects in the region, these projects are developed, procured, and implemented by overseas consultants. So it is a very consultant-intensive process whereby we get these things moving up and moving in the region. I have witnessed simple tasks like laying of pipes in a water supply project being contracted out to overseas vendors with nil local involvement. You know, so there is no local training provided to local companies who would in future be doing operation and maintenance on the investment. And this is a question like, where is the local capacity building in such projects, and what are MDBs doing about it? How do you prepare local companies to deliver such projects in future, including the operation and maintenance of this infrastructure that has been put in place? Are we supposed to look up for consultancy for next similar type of project? You know, where is this the efficiency paradox we've been talking about? You know, we talk about empowerment on one hand and efficiency on the other. You know, there's a very thin line we can draw between project efficiency and project being empowering the local people, the local stakeholders, the country itself. So I think,
want to move on your summary?
Yeah. So it presents questions like, you know, how the MDBs can enable us to enlarge our pool of experts and shape this transformative investment. One of the things I would suggest is that MDB should, in such case, ensure a foreign local consortium and get away from heavily expatriate dependent and consultant driven current development paradigm. And only MDBs can lead this. Readjustment is needed within the current development financing model. Only then will truly progress and build resilience. And the question for all of us is, are we ready for such readjustment in current development funding mechanisms, and are the MDBs ready for such readjustment in the current development funding mechanism that is being practiced currently? Yes.
Amit, very clear, and I'm wonderful to make this point about the need for capacity building as we invest, and you're really pointing to, again, another way that we need to think about the models of investment. I'm going to go to Chris now, Severin, and Chris is coming to us again from Global Environmental Fund. And Chris, there is a question for you as well. I don't know if you can see it on the chat, but I can read it. How can the GEF assist developing countries like Kenya that have started water trust funds, but which is inadequately linked to the kinds of innovations and shifts in financing for water and sanitation for sustainable development? You've already got a question on your hands, but let's start with your opening thoughts. You're on mute. Yeah. We can't hear you yet.
Now you unmuted me, but you had not before. Thank you. Okay. And let me just make, there's a small mistake here. I don't know what the Global Environmental Fund is. I've never heard of that. Well, I've heard it many times, but it's wrong. I'm with the Global Environment Facility, and there's quite a big difference. So the Global Environment Facility is a fairly old organization. It's been around for close to 30 years now. And there we have been keeping, I'll come to the question as well, but we've been very succinct and consistent in the way we've been investing these, our scarce funding. Getting transboundary cooperation, it was mentioned by Raul, it was also mentioned by Tom to a certain extent, and then we had Hank set it up as well, saying we do need to look at science-based analysis, and we do need to make sure that science is as the core of this. So otherwise it's very hard to set priorities if you don't know what you're managing. So what we have been doing, and I will say this, at sometimes I look at it and say, we've been doing this for 30 years, is this still the right thing to do? And especially under COVID now, it just dawns to me how important it is that we are very consistent in our approach. So we assist bringing countries together, ensure that we get the right information, scientific information to make the decisions. That then all the scientific information, what we call a transboundary diagnostic analysis, kind of pinpointing where the issues are. That then is lifted up to a ministerial endorsed action plan, where the countries, all the countries in the shared basin say, okay, we have an issue here. The ministers sign off on it, and then after, so that means we take science and bring it up to become a ministerial tool, an action tool. And then of course we assist countries in implementing these strategic action programs. So this, but one of the most important parts of that, as you heard, science, to understand science, there's a lot of capacity building involved. So that's one of the things we've been doing consistently throughout. Often going in and assisting development banks and other funders, bilateral funders and multilateral funders from a wide variety of private sector financing. And then we often end up doing a lot of the technical assistance, supporting capacity building to understand how to act in a transboundary setting. Because all this water, most of it, flows between countries. In the small island states, and in case of Pacific, for example, we're doing something else since we don't have a lot of shared, at least fresh water. So we say we work on common issues, for example, on integrated water resource management. We have been assisting both Fiji and many other, all the Pacific island states with some kind of water resource management strategy for how to manage this. So I do hear you. There is an issue, Amit, with the way that funding is being used and utilized. But we hope that we are a little more nimble at times, that we can come in with some of these. You said sometimes it's a little bit amount of funding that's needed, not the big loan, but the small for doing these feasibility studies. Sometimes we also use for that, of course, in conjunction with a large investment. In relation to the question, what was that in Kenya, the water funds? The water funds was something that was started together with the ADB and TNC in Latin America, and then it's been spreading. It's also in Asia now. These are very, very good tools to address issues around water and water scarcity and nature-based systems, and how we have to buy and invest in water for security to ensure long-term availability of the resources. But of course, they're not the end goal. There's no way. These are small funds. They're many times just $1 million, maybe a little bit more. So that's not, it's just it's a good tool to showcase both for private and public sector how this cooperation is, why that's so essential, and why we need to invest in these green infrastructure systems to support availability, long-term availability of resources. So with that, I know that we're already 5 minutes over time. I don't want to take more time. I would love to speak for another hour on this, but I know I'll see a couple of you again a little bit later in another session on financing. Thank you so much to everybody for inviting me, and it was again the Global Environment Facility. Thank you.
Thank you, and my mistake, Global Environment Facility. Thanks for the correction. Your emphasis to me on scientific information and the fact that we need to, in our rush to do things, not forget that the feasibility studies and the science really matters in terms of the right solutions, the right choices we make. So I'd like to turn to my colleague who's next to me, Niels Vlaanderen here, is the coordinator for international water at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water in the Netherlands. And maybe we can just zoom in on Niels as he gives us, and forgive us for going on a little bit longer, but I think this is extremely interesting just to be sure that we hear from everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Well, thanks all for all the examples brought to us in this session. And I think it's clear when we are serious about sustainable development and solutions that sustain, we need to look at a systemic level. And when we look at systemic level, also I think we realize that it is not about water. It is about decision affecting water taken outside the water sector, within governments, in industries, agriculture, and municipalities. And climate change increases this issue. And when the path is not sustainable at present, we see more droughts, more floods, more pollution, and more inequalities. What are the leverage points for change? How do we include the relevant stakeholder in this decision-making process? How to value water at all the levels, on local, regional, national, but also transboundary level. And what is complex, and of course affecting many actors, but also water can bring these actors together. And that brings me to my point that I want to stress that it's important at national and regional climate policies and planning, it must be taken into account an integrated approach to climate change and water management. Because especially increasing water stress requires increasingly tough decisions on how to allocate water resources among the different users. And it has economic, social, and environmental consequences. My second point is about public and private finance. Of course, now there is a lot of discussion on how to spend the public recovery fund, mostly public funds. But the assumption is that when we want to reach sustainable development and the SDGs by 2030, we need also the private funding, the private finance. And we have seen that at local scale, public funding can crowd out the private funding. And although in itself, it tries to solve some local problems, as a result, it can prevent the local financial markets to develop, hindering economic development, and as a result, creating dependencies. My third point is about COVID-19. So, Christmas bells. We know what is key to our well-being and the resilience of people and societies and our global economy. And COVID-19 reminded us on our vulnerabilities of our health and economic systems. So how to create more resilience? We must better understand the contribution of water resilience to the health and economic resilience. And lastly, how will we use the recovery funds of COVID-19? We must spend trillions of dollars, which can boost economies, and what we should use wisely and future-proof. Are we able to recover more sustainably from the crisis, building resilient societies for the future? This means low carbon infrastructures, renewable energy, nature-based solutions, and resilient water and food systems. In other words, are we able to invest in a green recovery? Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for staying with us over time. Very brief closing. First of all, thank you to everyone who was open to give their view of what they are doing to drive this paradigm shift. I am hopeful to see that, as Tompanella said, there are already projects on the ground driving that, to see donors committed to provoke that change and call us to that systemic view that is needed to inform these investments. But at the same time, there is still quite some to be done. And I think this was just 45 minutes, and it's impossible to engage at the level of depth we need into this discussion. So I think we really need more safe spaces, maybe not recorded and sent over the world, but safe spaces for systemic reflection, and maybe also beyond that for transformative relationships to happen. Because I think there was an European commissioner who said that we quite know what we should be doing, the changes we should be doing, especially regarding the management of water, but we're not having the political will to do them. So maybe through partnerships, you know, at all levels, people really committed, not just with their mind, but also with their heart to make those changes, we can make it happen. And this process of recovery, Peru, for instance, has committed 8% of their GDP for a recovery package. That's a unusual opportunity to drive and change the way we do these investments. So thank you, everyone. We'll be also checking what you have written through Moodle and preparing a good summary of this discussion. Thank you.